What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We've got Jose Ramirez, 25-0, defending his WBC and WBO 140-pound titles versus former WBC champ Viktor Postol, 31-2. Ramirez is from Central California, Postol is from Ukraine. Now this fight has been postponed twice, and although I have yet to see the new betting odds released, when the match was first made in early 2020, they had Ramirez, the undefeated champ, going off as a huge favorite. I'm talking 7-1, 10-1, which is absolutely nuts when you consider the caliber of his opponent, Viktor Postol. I remember when Postol's name started popping up on the fringe of some of these pound-for-pound best lists in 2013 to 2015. He captured the WBC belt in a showdown versus knockout artist Lucas Matisse, who was almost a 3-1 betting favorite over Postol. Postol methodically outboxed Matisse, who had trouble landing any of his fierce power punches. Postol finished him in the 10th and captured that WBC belt on the HBO broadcast. He looked outstanding, and that win was his coming out party. Then, in his very next fight, a unification match versus Terence Crawford with both Postol's WBC belt and Crawford's WBO belt up for grabs, Crawford methodically schooled him, dropping him twice and winning via clear-cut unanimous decision. This was one of the few wins that have really established Crawford as one of the best boxers in the world. He would go on to capture the remaining 2 belts, becoming the undisputed 140-pound champ, holding all 4 major titles before moving up to 147 welterweight. So in the wake of Crawford conquering then leaving the division, you had a few names quickly emerge, giving Postol plenty of competition for those vacant belts. Josh Taylor, Regis Prograis, Kirill Relik, Maurice Hooker, Ivan Baranchyk, and Jose Ramirez. You also had Mikey Garcia there for a minute when he beat Sergey Lipinets to capture 1 belt and then moved up to 147 to fight Errol Spence. Sergey Lipinets is also now at 147. So, Josh Taylor, the undefeated and exciting Scot, has this big fight versus former champ Viktor Postol, which ends up being a close match where Postol was actually up on the telecast unofficial scorecards through the first 8 rounds before getting dropped and weakened in the later rounds as Taylor rallied back and claimed a decision victory in front of a Scottish crowd. Excellent fight. Postol looked great until he didn't. Disputable scorecards, some actually had Postol edging that. So that's now 2 losses for Postol. And one quick note about that fight. In the 9th round, I think was the turning point, there was a scenario where Postol had his head down, and then you see fighters do this a lot. Josh Taylor then pushed down on the back of Postol's neck, exposing his back as Postol is kind of standing hunched over like that, with this being the body, this being the legs. And then Taylor kind of reaches around Postol's body and punches him to the kidney area. Postol immediately gestures to the ref, points at his back, kind of winces for more than a quick moment. And keep in mind, this was a very close fight through those first 8 rounds. And immediately after this, the ref doesn't acknowledge the arguable foul by Taylor. And Taylor, within the next 15 to 20 seconds, rocks Postol to the face. And the fight's never the same at that point. I do think that foul or potential foul was a big turning point in that fight that was never acknowledged and definitely had an impact on Postol's performance. I'm just looking at how Postol fought up until that point and then after that point. Neither here nor there. Taylor was awarded the decision. Life goes on. So after Taylor's win over Postol, the 140-pound division holds a Super Series tournament, largely streamed on DAZN, where New Orleans native Regis Prograis looked almost like a young Shane Mosley, stopping Kirill Relik in the middle rounds early in that tournament, and largely positioning him as a slight favorite to win the tournament. Go back and check out Regis Prograis versus Kirill Relik. That was supposed to be a very, very competitive fight. Prograis shined right there. Also early in the tournament, Josh Taylor stops both Ryan Martin and Ivan Baranchyk, capturing the IBF title in the latter while on his way to a major showdown versus that super talented Regis Prograis. Taylor's IBF title and Prograis' WBA title were both on the line there. And Josh Taylor outgunned Prograis in a close but clear decision victory. I was really expecting Prograis to win that one, but Taylor is really looking like a Hall of Famer at this stage of his career, and Prograis was actually the betting favorite in that one, a 1.5 to 1 to a nearly 2 to 1 favorite. Taylor obviously didn't get the memo. So Taylor emerges out of that Super Series the clear victor. And on the other side of this stacked 140-pound division, you've got Jose Ramirez, training out of the famed Oxnard, California stable under Robert Garcia, multiple-time trainer of the year and older brother and trainer to Mikey Garcia. This camp has had so much world-class talent flowing through it. Fernando Vargas, Antonio Margarito, Nonito Donaire, Marcos Maidana, Victor Ortiz, Brandon Rios, of course Mikey Garcia, and now Jose Ramirez. Ramirez fought Amir Imam for the WBC title that Crawford vacated, one of the 4 belts that Crawford vacated that wasn't up for grabs in that Super Series, and that's the same belt that was previously held by Viktor Postol. Ramirez beats Imam via unanimous decision and then defends his belt successfully versus Antonio Orozco and Jose Cepeda, then challenged long-rangy boxer-puncher Maurice Hooker in a unification match. Ramirez's WBC belt and Hooker's WBO belts both up for grabs. This was big and also streamed on DAZN. Maurice Hooker got off to an early lead, but slowly started allowing his back to touch the ropes, while the pressure fighter, Ramirez, slowly started upping the pace and increasing his volume and combinations. Hooker's corner pleaded with him to keep his back off the ropes and to keep this fight in the middle of the ring. Hooker then failed to control the spacing, being the slightly taller and longer fighter, got caught up on the ropes one too many times, got blasted by a Ramirez combination that had Hooker out on his feet, and the fight was stopped in the 6th round. Huge moment in Ramirez's career, as he now holds the WBC and WBO belts, while Josh Taylor now holds the WBA and IBF titles. So the idea is to eventually have this mega showdown for all the marbles. Taylor and Ramirez have largely cleared out their competition, but Ramirez still has some business that he's got to handle versus Viktor Postol, and as I mentioned, Postol is way undervalued as such a heavy underdog. They are giving Postol very little respect and no realistic chance at beating Jose Ramirez. While I would agree that Ramirez is in the sweet spot of his career, he's 28 years young, still undefeated, holds multiple belts, he's got the win to his back, whereas Postol has now lost 2, has still never been stopped, but he has lost 2, and he's now 36 years old, which is really up there, especially in those lower weight divisions. And for all intents and purposes, this could be his last chance at recapturing major belts at 140. Or any division for that matter. If Postol were to win here, he'd be playing a huge spoiler to that Taylor-Ramirez unification super fight. But hey, I previously thought that Regis Prograis was going to have the final say in who emerged as the king of the division, so anything's possible. I do think that Postol can hang with Ramirez in the early rounds, boxing intelligently as he always does, but Postol fading late in that Taylor fight has me a little concerned, especially versus someone like Ramirez, who's always applying pressure and is one of those we're going to be here for a while, so pack a lunch type of guys, who's going to be in there as long as you're there, and that's assuming that you are able to handle his power. I don't think that there's a high likelihood of Postol stopping Ramirez. That would require sustained amounts of high explosion, and I just don't think Postol has that at this stage of his career. I mean, he wasn't a devastating puncher even when he was young, and stoppages versus a Lucas Matisse were the exception for Postol, not the rule. Only 12 of Postol's 31 wins have come via KO, TKO, whereas Ramirez has knocked 17 of his 25 opponents out. So I have this Ramirez versus Postol fight more or less even through the first 4 rounds, with Ramirez slowly closing the distance and Postol's legs getting fatigued by the middle rounds, and I picture Ramirez either becoming the first person to stop Postol in the late rounds, or Postol showing just enough savvy to survive while losing a competitive but clear decision. One wildcard possibility here, and this is due to the COVID pandemic, is that people's training routines and regimens have largely and often been disturbed. And we've got more fighters, both in boxing and in MMA, missing weight. We just saw David Benavidez lose his 168-pound title on the scales last weekend. Now, during the 30-day weigh-in for this Postol versus Ramirez fight, Postol was already down to 147, only 7 pounds away from the targeted and required 140-pound weight limit, with still a month to go. Ramirez's 30-day weight was 153, so he'd have to drop 13 pounds in that final month. He is still within striking range to do so, but it's worth keeping an eye on. I can't imagine Ramirez's size will allow him to stay at 140 for too much longer. Yes, he is only 5'10", Postol's 5'11", but if you look at like the shoulder to shoulder, just the body frame, Ramirez is a pretty big dude. I don't see him keeping up at 140. So he's going to need to win here and then sort things out versus Josh Taylor for all the 140-pound glory. And then he's going to move up to 147, I'd imagine. So the third time appears to be the charm in making this fight happen. And I've got Ramirez winning, I'd say by late stoppage, becoming the first to stop Viktor Postol. And I still might be underestimating the skill and the will of the former champ from the Ukraine. I just feel like Ramirez is a surging talent with a great team, a great attitude, and something to prove. Whereas, let's be honest, 36 is 36, especially for a guy who relies on timing, reflexes, and most importantly, his legs, mobility. I think that the 28-year-old might wear on him. However, if you're looking for a big value play from a betting perspective, if the old odds are any reflection or indication of where the new odds will be, you'll be getting Postol as an unbelievably long shot underdog. I would have handicapped this one as having Postol at maybe a 2.5 to 3 to 1 underdog. No way would I have him at a 6, 7, or 9 to 1. That's bogus. Postol's much better than that. But let me know your thoughts on this very interesting matchup for Ramirez's 2 titles. Are the boxing and betting public totally missing the mark here in discounting the former champ's chances at defeating the young, undefeated rising star out of California? Please weigh in with your thoughts in the comment section. And please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.